has changed the way India banks. We all know it wasn't easy for him to start out on his own in the 1980s, when the Indian economy was still closed and growth was far from robust. Kotak Mahindra is now the third largest private sector bank in India, and Mr. Uday Kotak stands among the foremost stalwarts of India's success story. Kotak Mahindra has transformed how India banks. May I now invite Mr. Uday Kotak, the man India banks on, to deliver the keynote address.
Good afternoon, friends. Let me first start with a little bit of a story of my relationship with Arnab Goswami. Arnab is not in the room, and therefore I can venture to be even bolder. I have known Arnab well before his starting the venture on Republic TV, and even before his earlier roles, and always thought about him as a bright Mumbai boy who is really going to go places, and therefore built a personal relationship with him over the last more than 25 years. And what is the most interesting for me is not Arnab Goswami, the newsman. It is Arnab, the entrepreneur. And that's a very difficult transition to make from being a newsman or an anchor or working on interviews and stories to continue doing that, but build a business around news, media, television, and digital. So I would really like to personally congratulate my young Mumbai boy for really making it big. So friends, when we talk about transformation of India, I think it's right across the length and breadth of the country. And if we look at where we are today and just do a little bit of math, say we are at about 3.4 trillion economy. And if we multiply ourselves to grow somewhere between 7 and 8%, I think by 2047, when we reach the 100 years, we should target to be an economy larger than $25 trillion. And I hope that in this period, the rupee is one of the most stable currencies in the world, and not something which keeps on depreciating every time something happens in the developed world, and all emerging market currencies get depreciated. And therefore, one of the most important things I think we must focus on through our productivity, the quality of our business, the quality of our current account, the quality of our fiscal deficit, is on the strength of our economy. The Indian rupee should be one of the more stable anchor currencies. In this transformation, I would really like to see the rupee currency in this next 25 years as being one of the foremost currencies people around the world trust and use as an international convertible currency. The unbelievable privilege which the United States of America gets, because it is the world's reserve currency, gives it the ability to grow and do things which probably no other country in the world can do. But with the current developments in the world, including the geopolitics, and the way India has navigated those geopolitics, it gives India an opportunity to become a truly world-class, acceptable currency people around the world trust. And let me expand on that. Let us think about each of us. We all, of course, trust the Indian rupee, but if we have to put our money outside, in an outside currency, most of us would be comfortable with the US dollar, probably the euro, maybe the pound, yen. but certainly not the Chinese yuan. The country which is taking on the US worldwide in terms of global scale and size, friends, are the Chinese. And they're working relentlessly to move to the position of a reserve currency, which will give them unbelievable privilege away from any other country. And the battle of the giants today in terms of the global economic size is US versus China. It's time for us at this point of time that over the next 20 to 25 years, that we certainly should be amongst the top 1 or 2 countries in the world, but become the favored nation the world can trust. And it is in this context, friends, the steps taken by India today in repositioning India in the new world era are extremely important. And I am saying this truly as an Indian. Last year, when Russia first attacked Ukraine, I was a very worried man because I saw immediate spike in price of oil and India being vulnerable to oil, which affects our current account deficit, which affects our fiscal deficit. So this worried me a lot. But the way India has navigated the geopolitics and the economic outcomes which have come out of that, including taking a position not necessarily following what the West wanted us to do, but taking an India position that this is what is right for India's interest. And we will abstain without taking sides. We will continue to do what is in our self-interest. If it means lower price of oil, we are ready to import even from Russia. Because if Russia can supply energy to Europe despite the war, why can't India get it? And that position of confidence which India demonstrated, rather than succumbing to the Western pressures, was the first turning point of economics and geopolitics working seamlessly in India's favor. And today, India is at a much better position. We have substituted a lot of our energy requirements to get the lowest cost of energy for India, and at the same time, maintain the relationship and the equilibrium in the changing world. And of course, India is in this unique position. It has a great relationship with the US, with Europe, with Russia, and amazingly, the Middle East. India and the UAE, India and Saudi Arabia, we have become much closer partners. And therefore, the work which we have done in using our and leveraging our geopolitical position to India's economic advantage is probably one of the less stated aspects of the future of India, where geopolitically, India becomes significantly more important player relative to our current size of the economy. Therefore, our brand India in terms of geopolitical position is significantly ahead of where our economic heft needs to be. And it is here that we need to use this position of a very large, probably larger than life compared to size of the Indian economy versus China. Leverage this to our advantage and disproportionately grow our economy. And in that context, I would say the first major step is we must work towards doing everything in our process, in our regulatory framework, in our financial system to have that confidence that the world says, in rupee, we trust. If you read any US dollar bill, there is a line which says, in God we trust. I would like, and I have a very genuine belief that God was Indian. And therefore I say, in rupee we trust. Now, it's good to say this, but how do we achieve this? You know, we all love to believe and dream, but dreams need to follow some serious execution. And if India wants to move from a 3.3, 3.4 trillion economy to a 25 trillion economy, by 2047, which is a growth rate of 7 to 8%. What are our challenges? In the past, whenever we have tried to grow faster than 7%, we've normally landed up with some accident. Whether it was 1992, some of you may be aware, the famous securities scandal. Then 2000 was another scandal in the securities market. Then you had the 2007-8 financial crisis. Then you had the huge issue of NPLs, which followed post-2008 and which put back the Indian financial system for nearly 10 years with a number of companies getting into trouble. A lot of the corporate India, a lot of the financial sector companies, and all that really manifested in the 10 years between 2008 all the way up to 2018-19. And we are fortunately now at a stage where we have cleared up a lot of the mess which has happened over these many years. But we are now at a stage where we have to be able to do two things at the same time. One, put up a financial system which can scale while maintaining stability. We should be able to grow faster without blowing up. And for that, you need significant capacity building in our system. I do believe the Indian economy is poised for faster growth, but I do believe the Indian financial system has to catch up on capacity to get to scale. And at times, if we are burnt by a particular accident, we have to be careful that just because there is a road accident, you do not stop cars from driving on the road. Because if you don't drive on the road, you don't make progress. But you can easily say, my system is safe by having no cars drive on the road. Therefore, we need to make sure the cars continue to drive, whether it's a Maruti or a truck. We have got to be having the ability of providing roadways for all, having reasonable rules which balance risk management with governance, with aspiration for India's future. And here I would strongly, on the platform of the Republic TV, say that India needs significant capacity building in India's financial sector. Or else we run the risk of the economy growing faster or trying to grow faster with the risk of overheating and frictions and the financial sector lagging behind. Therefore, the transformation for the Indian economy in many ways rests on the ability and the power of India's financial sector to grow while managing risks. It is not either or, it is and. We have to grow and manage risks in the financial sector. And why is financial sector different, friends? At times people ask this question, why can't we just grow? Why can't we relax everything? We have to keep in mind the most leveraged of all sectors is the financial sector. A bank is safe, but the bank has the highest debt equity ratio in terms of ratio of capital to deposits. Therefore, we need to manage risk for people's monies, for keeping people's monies safe, but growing. And to manage both requires a vision and a nuance. And I believe that just as we have a phenomenal vision for a transformation of the Indian economy, we must set in place a strong capacity building for India's financial sector. And this is where the transformative agenda for the financial sector has to be led by a combination, which is a partnership of the government, of the regulators, and the key players who can build India's financial sector guardrails for a 25 to 30 trillion economy at India's 100 years. And I would love to see by 2047, India not in the top 3, but certainly 1 or 2. And for that, the road ahead is long and requires hard work and a lot more entrepreneurs who are given the roadway to grow, aspire, like Arnab Goswami. And Indian entrepreneurs must be given the wings with the right ability and combination of professional management. I believe a lot of entrepreneurs have dreams. Many of them get into business. But the challenge is, how do you manage creativity with strong process and professionalism? And if you can get both together, you create a winning combination. Creativity and entrepreneurship combined with process and professionalism. That's what makes a true success. And in that context, friends, there are a number of things I have in my mind which India has to do in its capacity building. Whether it's a simple thing, I think we did a brilliant job by introducing the insolvency and the bankruptcy code. But as was told earlier by Jyotiraditya, the devil is in the detail. In practice, the success ratios of IBC have dramatically dropped in recent years. A creditor in a conglomerate situation is getting less than 10% of the loan. And overall amount of money collected for creditors through the IBC process is now less than 30%. It is not something which we should accept. And the process, the legal process, the judicial process is also mired with a lot of challenges. So we have a good intent, we have got a law in place, the issue is back to execution. Similarly, I think it's crucial for the Indian regulatory system to have a much deeper collaboration to an overall regulation and development framework. Therefore, there should be a much greater coordination across the regulatory system. And you don't want different approaches to regulation from the point of view of what's right for the financial sector, but more thought through unified process between the different regulators, whether it is the RBI, the SEBI, the IRDA, the IFSCA, the MCA, a need for a coordinated approach to regulation for building our future. We also need, and I think the finance minister spoke in her budget speech, if you go through paragraphs 99 and 100 of the speech, she has actually highlighted that it is time for review of financial regulation in India. A time for a detailed review of what is our current regulation. How do we revisit that to build an India which can get to a 30 trillion economy by 2047? The current regulatory framework will be challenging for us to be getting there. And I do also believe that as the presidency of G20, one of the things which India must lead is how can we get to significant improvement in capacity building in the financial sector as leaders of G20. This is an issue certainly in India, but in many other countries. And with that, I'm looking forward to a chat with my friend, and I hope he's not too harsh on me. Okay? And really thank you very much, and I'm delighted and honored to be here. Thank you.
Mr. Kotak, I must say that I'm truly overwhelmed for two reasons today. The first, of course, is all the kindness you've bestowed on me, and every word that you've said here is deeply inspiring to me. It comes from a person of your experience and stature. The second reason is because I have got a lot of phone calls and messages when people saw you in the audience in the front row as Mr. Scindia was speaking, and all of them asked me, how did you manage to get Mr. Uday Kotak to your event? And I know this is very rare for you. And I know that you've flown down all the way from Mumbai. This gesture means a lot to me, and I'm sure to all of us in the audience. So a round of applause. Sir, you are a legend, I know that. And I must say that I may just share a small bit about our personal association. You've been kind to invite me to your events once, and I was really embarrassed to be speaking in your presence. On one occasion, as I was starting Republic, friends, I went to Mr. Kotak's office, And I had no agenda. I came to meet him. And he was kind enough to see me in his office in BKC. And as we sat down, he asked me a few questions on the business fundamentals of what I was trying to build. And eventually he asked his key managers to be away. It was him and me, and I think one more person. We spent about half an hour and 45 minutes, Mr. Kotak, I don't know if you remember, where he leafed through every aspect of the, at that time, financially tiny business that Republic was building. And he sat down with me and he asked me, what are your projections? What are your estimates? What can go wrong? What can go right? What is your leverage? What is your debt? What is your plan? But most importantly, he spent 15 minutes quizzing me about my vision. And at the end of it, you told me, just go for it, Arnab. That was 2016, sir, you don't remember. But that meant so much to me because we were trying to fly solo and you told me, go for it. And I can tell you when I called him a month and a half back and I said, Mr. Kotak, you must come. May I share this? He again asked me on the phone, tell me how you're doing. And I gave him a few fundamentals and then he said, I'm coming. So Mr. Kotak, your coming here is a testament to your continuing faith in Republic and on us. So a long answer, but personally very grateful to you, sir. Very, 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 very grateful. Now, not losing any more time, sir. I have a few questions for you and I found it fascinating. And we have some people here who are really into geostrategy and economics. Tomorrow, Mr. Gurumurthy is coming. Another visionary, Mr. Sridhar Vembu, chairman of Zoho Corporation, is here. Sir, I found it incredible that you as a banker spoke about geostrategy, geopolitics. You spoke about how we acted in our self-interest regarding the price of oil and how we were ensuring that our energy supplies from Russia continued. But these are tough decisions, Mr. Kotak. And you're a banker. You look at risk factors. The first one which comes to my mind is, great, this government did it. But where is the guaranteed continuity in a democracy where a tumultuous process of an election happens every 5 years and the politics is so volatile? Does that risk factor worry you? Because you also said that if you want to be the most favored nation the world can trust, you're going to have to take these decisions, learn the nuance, play the game at the high table. Do we have that continuity in a democracy like India, or is that our weakness compared to China?
I think I have great faith in the people of India, that we'll finally select a government and a leader which prioritizes India's self-interest over everything else. And therefore, it's a confidence in the people of India and India's self-interest over everything else. Long ago, my grandfather gave me a lesson, which was the difference between selfishness and enlightened self-interest. And I hold this as a critical part for India's future. We must have the courage of conviction to take decisions which are in our enlightened self-interest. And we should not be scared by any power on earth to do that. We have to manage the diplomacy because we are living in a connected world. But we should not compromise what's right for India just because it is geopolitically inconvenient and politically difficult to execute. That is the true strength of leadership. And I actually feel that the strength and the maturity of the Indian democracy is if we continue to keep the clear goal that India's self-interest, political and economic, overrides everything else. And for whatever reason, I think we also have to ask the tough question, what is our long-term plan to deal with our eastern neighbor? We, even today, and again I'm being pretty frank, Arnab, we import a lot more from China than we export. We have a $60 billion deficit. And therefore China sees India as a great market and has currently been far more competitive in selling to India on competition and good price than what India is currently. Therefore my view is, and I genuinely believe this, we have to thrash competition by growing on our strength and not by trying to stop a competitor in ways which are not consistent with good practice. Therefore, give me a day for the true conviction of India and for the true arrival of India when India becomes a current account surplus country, where India is competitive enough to export more than it imports. In our entire history, if you look at it over the last 40 or 50 years, every year we import more than we export. I want this transformation where we earn more money or more dollars than we pay. And if we reach that, then we have the ability to call the world, thank you very much, we don't need you. You need us more because you are buying more from us than selling to us. That's the power which we need to get to. And today China has that. It's a huge current account surplus. Therefore, our strength has to be political, has to be geopolitical. But the ultimate test of a strength of a country has to be economic power, which is unparalleled. And it is here we must work, because the two biggest economic powers today by far are US and China. And that is our goal, and that should be our gold standard.
Absolutely, sir. But China has built on it over decades, built on it over 20 years, and we are right getting there. Now, recent episodes, we have a lot of doomsday sayers in our country, and I just love your positive energy. You know, you've seen so much. But there's a lot of doomsday prophets in our country. I am, in the recent episode about one major corporate led people to put out op-eds and articles about how the Indian economy is collapsing. We don't have an institutional mechanism. We don't have regulatory control, and how the systems are not resilient enough. It was almost as if perforce they wanted to agitate the system so much that they wanted a market crash. They wanted the market crash to continue. They wanted the capital markets affected. They wanted India's image to be affected. Whereas I always thought otherwise, and I don't know how to balance this, Mr. Kotak, but am I right in believing that we are overdoing the negativity? Because hasn't institutional foresight actually safeguarded India from recession? Hasn't the RBI Governor Shaktikant Das, hasn't he done a fantastic job? Hasn't he been ahead of the curve compared to the US Fed? And when the SVB, sorry for a long question, sir, it's a bad old habit, but when the SVB and Credit Suisse collapse, you don't say those countries are collapsing. But one episode happens which doesn't even affect the company in the long term that we are talking about, and we say India is finished. So how do we balance it, or we just have to live with this? And how do you view it from a macroeconomic perspective?
I think economics and business have a momentum of their own. And I compare listed companies subject to being in a jungle, okay? In a jungle, there are many animals. There are different animals of different styles. And I'm using the capital market phrase, there are the hedge funds, there are the long-only investors, there are the retail investors, there are fundamental investors, there are technical investors, there are day traders. There's every sort of animal in a jungle. And think about the markets like the jungle. And some animal will make some noise, some animal will make some sound, some will be good, some will be shrill. Take it in our stride. And as long as we are clear that we are doing the right things and consistent with fair and free markets, we will be fine. And these kind of accidents will always happen. I was told a wonderful, Arnab, I went for a holiday to South Africa in one of the reserves.
Right.
And just as we were entering the jungle, there was a wonderful quote. It said, in the jungle, there are no winners or losers. There are only consequences. And what does this mean? That if there is a lion in a chase for, say, a deer, and is not able to capture the deer, we think the lion has lost. The lion has not lost. The lion will remain hungry. That's the consequence. And if he catches his prey, The lion has not won. He will be fed. So the law of the jungle is consequences. It is not about winners and losers. And therefore, when you think about markets, when you think about economics, when you think about big businesses, think about consequences, not who has won and who has lost. And we should approach our way into business in the marketplace as keep the markets free and fair, have regulation which manages the traffic, does not stop the cars from traveling on the road, but let the marketplace and fair regulation decide it. And this is where I have said that need for policy, regulation, and market players to work in a collaborative manner rather than in a manner which is adversarial.
Has the banking system become too risk averse?
I think the banking system has a challenge of capacity. And
Capacities.
one of the things which we need to do is we have to get to scale. We need to be able to do things which will enable Indian business to get to scale. And let me give a very simple example. If a large corporate wants to acquire another company, the only people the corporate can go to for financing the acquisition is a foreign bank. If the same company or any acquirer goes to an Indian bank, the current regulation is the bank can lend against shares to an individual, not more than 20 lakhs. Now, if you're doing an acquisition of 10, 20, 30,000 crores, why should a foreign bank fund this acquisition? Why should it not be that Indian banking system has the confidence and the capability and the risk underwriting capacity to underwrite such risk and syndicate it out rather than saying, I cannot do it. So and this rule actually came, when this rule came? 1992 after the security scam. And it has remained like that forever. So we need to also make sure that all our regulation is consistent with our aspiration.
Do you work with the government towards this?
I would work with all policymakers in what I believe is right for India, and always open to go out there and say, if we want to build India of the future, we cannot say we will not take the risk. We will have to manage the risk, but grow for our aspiration.
Behind your kindly demeanor is a very tough negotiator. I've heard these legends about you when you're on the other side. Nobody wants to be on the other side of Uday Kotak. If I were to take that word of negotiation and ask you differently, how does India negotiate from a position of power when we haven't built the scale yet? And yet we are doing it. You see this UK-India financial partnership, which has been discussed for a long time. We are negotiating from a position of power. Now, along with that, we've just become the most populous nation in the world. Do we use our demographic dividend to negotiate harder? So a broad question, two questions really rolled into one. How do we leverage our demographic dividend? Second question, how do we use it, or are the other things we use to negotiate as a country from a position of power to build a better country for the next generation?
I read a wonderful news article or a snippet today, Arnab, on this, on UK and India negotiation. The UK public, or some members of the UK public, are actually alleging to their Prime Minister Rishi Sunak that you're weak-kneed and selling out to India. Can you imagine the country which ran India for a few hundred years,
wow,
where we always felt we were sold out to them, is actually thinking the other way?
Yeah. Super. We love that.
But the question is, how do we negotiate a deal when he is going to have political heat on the other side?
Yeah.
Where he is perceived to be the weaker negotiator than us. One of the important aspects in negotiation is to be able to do a deal not based on perception of who's stronger or who's weaker, on what is our interest. And we negotiate from our interest and not from the point of view of winning. And as long as we do that, if it serves our interest, we should do it. And we should be able to convince the UK government, even if it's a Prime Minister of Indian origin, that this is in India's interest and UK's interest. And don't bother about all this noise around you. And that is the message which I would give to Rishi Sunak. Negotiate and do a deal with India on fair terms for both. And don't be scared about populism and noise in your country, just as India is not scared of populism and noise in its country.
Wow, that's the language we want to. And we are actually hearing India speak on the global stage. Lastly to you, sir. The theme is time of transformation, Mr. Kotak. Everyone talks about 2047. But if I were to look at a 10-year horizon from now, what is the transformation that you see? If you can both capture it in numbers as well as visualize it for us, because the pace is so quick these days.
Yeah, in 10 years, I would like to see India grow at an average of about 8%, which would take to Indian economy GDP size of around $8 to $9 trillion. A dream would be $10 trillion. I think that will be tough, but $8 to $9 trillion is achievable. And therefore, if I said by 2035, India should cross the double digit on GDP. The point which I would like to highlight is this transformation is going to come with significant change. I think the technology in the digital world is transforming us beyond recognition. I think we as a nation, as a people, will have to face the challenges of the new language of technology and digital. And I'd say for that, the future is going to be younger generation. I always love it when my two boys tell me, "Father, you don't get it." And it is a fact. I don't get it compared to them. Therefore, it is our egos and many of us in this room to have the humility and acceptability to say the younger generation is smarter than us. And that is what will make our future.
Sir, I can't express my thanks in words. You're a colossus, but for coming here, for inspiring us. And I hope that your strategic leadership continues to guide the country as well in as many global forums as possible. Thank you very, very much, Mr. Kotak.
Thank you very much, Arnab, and great to be here with you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kotak and Arnab, for that conversation that has reaffirmed our collective belief. Just watch your step as you step down on